Now I got to tell you something. Falling into quicksand is not the very best way to start your day. But have you noticed sometimes that things happen all around you that you're not anticipating? But the legend goes this way. A man fell into quicksand and he started to sink. And while he was sinking, the Chinese philosopher Confucius walked by and said, "There is evidence that men should stay out of such places." But the man was still sinking in quicksand. But Buddha walked by saying, "Let that be a lesson to the world." But the man was still sinking in quicksand. Good news is, Muhammad walked by and said, "Alas, it is the will of Allah." But the man was still sinking in quicksand. Then a Hindu walked by and said, "Never mind, you will return to earth in another form." I've always questioned that. My luck, I come back as an ant. I'd be back in a minute and a half, and somebody go, "Oh!" I wouldn't put my hope in there, never mind. But the man was still sinking in quicksand. Finally, Jesus walked by, and he reached out his hand and said, "Grab hold of my hand, and I will pull you out." Amen. God will pull us through. Yes. It's what the whole entire Vacation Bible School was about. But it is a truth that is undeniable, that God will pull us through. And so how do we weather the seasons of life when friends get far away? And that happens sometimes. And the fair havens that we counted on have faded from the horizon, and we are becoming storm-tossed in the sea of life. And everything that we need has been stripped away. You lose your job, you're bombing several of your classes in school, and your home begins to feel like a battleground, and you've just been diagnosed with a serious illness. And the church that you depend on is in dire straits. Today, the churches have gone away from the old-fashioned gospel, but we need the gospel more today than we ever have. Amen. We need a real relationship with Jesus, so when you come into the sanctuary of God, you feel His presence. Amen. So that you're not overwhelmed by the world, but there is something down on the inside that begins to stir that says, "Lo, I am with you, and I will pull you through. I will get you to the other side." Amen. In seasons like this, many of us, myself included, feel like that we need something new, a new word from God that applies directly to our situation. In Acts 27, after more than 2 years of waiting, Paul was finally setting sail for Rome. His whole life had led up to this moment. All of his training and experience had prepared him to preach the gospel before Caesar himself, and he was excited about taking the gospel to the world. But on the journey from Jerusalem to Rome, Paul faced one of the fiercest storms of his life, and the strength that he needed did not come from a new promise, but an old promise. A promise God had given to him years before. We need to remember that whatever God said before, He can still bring it to pass today. You don't need a new promise. You just need to start believing in the old promise. Amen. The old promise that whosoever will, let him come unto me, and I will give him life. That old promise still is in effect today. We need the promise of God in our lives. Amen. So goodbye to fair havens. Sometimes that's the way life is. The trip starts off well. I remember when I started off being a Christian, the very first day I thought I was the most powerful Christian in the whole world on the day that I got saved. Not all the day, but on the very moment that I got saved. I thought I was the strongest Christian there ever was. And then the devil came right beside me and said, "Well, you had an emotional experience, but that's all you had." And then God said, "But I was in the emotion." I was the one that was moving there for you. And I turned back to the devil and said, I am not defeated just yet. I'll hold on a little longer. I'll go another day. And I'll go another day. And I'll go a day until I can stand up without worry and say to the devil, the ground that I stand on is holy, and you will come no farther, for I know whom I have believed. Amen.